I was in a bad car accident on the day that I decided to go to a Mary Magdalene initiation retreat. 5-car pileup, airbags deployed, smoke in the car, the alarm screaming that we needed to exit the car because there was a fire, my daughter wailing hysterically in the back seat, my husband not really conscious. Somehow I managed to climb to the back. I got my daughter out into the safety of the median. I got my husband to wake up and got him into the median with my daughter, where we met up with others who were now exiting their cars and assessing how they were doing. And in the midst of that mayhem and of my worst fear being made manifest, I felt a pull, a tug towards a car that's doors were still shut. Everyone else was checking on each other and making sure that they were relatively okay. Everyone else was walking away from the wreckage, and I was told to run to it. I didn't yet know that my initiation had already begun right there on the side of a highway. Initiation doesn't wait. I'm going to tell you the whole story, the accident, the retreat, and the woman that I met 2 years later who changed everything about what I thought I knew about how this work begins. But first, so you know who's talking to you, I'm Yolanda. I am a Mary Magdalene Priestess. I walk both the path of the Marys and the Dark Mother, and I've learned that initiation rarely arrives the way that we expect it to. Let me take you back to that highway. So there we were, and I felt this pull. And what was interesting was that right along the side of that pull, there was this wail that began. And it sounded like the cry of someone who was terrified and alone. I looked around, trying to find who it was that was crying, and everyone was talking and seemed relatively calm, all things considered, and no one was hearing this wail. And as I looked around, this was only a matter of seconds, the cry became a scream, this deep, heart-wrenching scream, the kind that someone does when their worst fears have been realized. I felt that tug again. I turned to the left, and I knew instinctively that it was coming from the sedan in front of us, the sedan that we had hit. And I realized that the doors were still shut. Everyone else had stumbled out of their cars, but not that car. And so I did something that I normally wouldn't do. I looked down at my husband and my daughter, who were calm and were waiting and were actually talking to some of the other passengers. And I said to them, I need to go to that car. That person needs help. And my husband looked at me and he said, go. And I ran. And as I got to the car doors, I remember knowing instinctively that it was a woman. This is where it becomes a little blurry, but I'll share with you what I remember. I remember running to this car, opening the car doors without hesitation, knowing that there was going to be a woman there, and coming face to face with her. She was sitting in the driver's seat still, with her hands on the steering wheel, frozen in place, looking straight ahead, not making a sound. But I could hear her screams. And I don't know what it was exactly that I said to her, but I remember a calm coming over me. And I remember talking to her very clearly and plainly and telling her that she was going to be okay, that she was not alone, that I was there with her. At some point, she looked at me and her hands ended up in mine, and they were shaking and trembling, and my hands were steady. And I told her, I'm here with you. Look at me. Look in my eyes. And I ran her through these exercises to ground her back into a body, exercises that I'd learned in therapy when I was dealing with my own driving phobias. And she looked at me. A connection was made. It was like I was looking at a sister. We understood each other. We knew each other. We were going to be fine. And somewhere along that, she said to me that she was scared of driving highways and interstates and parkways. She'd been frightened of that for a long time. And she'd finally built up the confidence recently to start driving on interstates. And this had happened. Her worst fear. I looked back at our very mangled truck that would never be driven again. And I saw her small sedan. And I pictured our massive vehicle barreling at full speed at her car, and what she must have felt in those seconds. Minutes passed. I think looking back that that entire segment only happened in about 5 minutes, maybe 7 tops. The paramedics were already there. I saw them coming towards her. I told them she needs assistance. And I said to her, I have to go back to my family. I knew she was calmer and she would be okay. And I left and I ran to my family. And I want to go off topic just for a moment to tell you a little side story. Before I decided to do this, in my earlier life, I had been a teacher. My comfort zone is in academia. I enjoy a well-written book. I delve into narratives and piece them apart and enjoy having discussions about themes and literary devices and tropes. My joy is in exploring mystical and apocryphal texts. And I'd been reading about Mary Magdalene for years at that point, delving into those texts and cross-referencing them with older texts. I was doing all of that academic work that I enjoy so much, that brings me so much fulfillment. And yet, I had not realized the lens that academic kept me at arm's length. I could study the fire without standing in it. And so I'd come to Mary Magdalene the way that felt safe for me. I studied her, not understanding that scholarship was becoming an armor. And so here I was now, on my way to my first retreat, not fully understanding that I was going to be initiated as a priestess. It was an option. It wasn't a requirement of this retreat. But on a soul level, I'd already made that decision. And so my initiation had already begun. And it took the form of my greatest fear, the one that I hadn't been able to overcome. And yet, as we headed with our truck to the tow yard, I remember thinking to myself, normally I would take this as a sign that it's time to go home with my family and no one would question it. No one would criticize me for making that choice. But the idea of going home felt like a tearing, as if something was being ripped away from me. And I couldn't understand it. I, who have always thought things through logically when I'm studying them. You see, studying for me was a way for me to detach from emotions that felt incredibly heavy and overwhelming. And yet here I was, wanting to once again run into the unknown, reeling from this massive and unexpected event and wanting to run back into the fire. I knew that if there was some way for me to get safely to this retreat, that I should do it. And so my husband inevitably turns to me and asks me, are you going? Now, we were at this point about an hour and 20 minutes away from the location. And I looked at him and I said, I think I'm supposed to go. And he knew how I was. He knew this was outside of the norm for me. And so he looked at me and he said, we'll get you there. I'll save the finer details of the retreat for another time because this will get lengthy. But suffice it to say that that retreat was an initiation for me in many ways. But this was going to make me incredibly late to the retreat, obviously. And so now I was going to be walking into a space and I was going to draw attention to me simply because I was going to be late, which was not something I enjoyed. I did it anyway. I was embraced and welcomed with so much love and compassion. So that became the opening for me to surrender with trust in people that I didn't know. Looking back now, I understand that I would have had my guard up. And so all the guards fell away for me. It wasn't needed in this initiation. I was already held. I was already protected. That was the first time that I would see auras in people. Their traumas, their grief, their fear, exiting their light body like a film of smoke. It would be the first time that I would stand in a circle of sisterhood where I did not feel unsafe. And it would be the first time that I would make the conscious choice to walk this path as a priestess, the path of the practitioner, of the helper who is here to serve the collective, is one of great and deep initiations. It's the only way that we can truly be of service. We have to walk through the wilderness ourselves so that we can stand there holding the lantern at the doorway. And so, for several days, I sat with light and shadow. I released grief and shame with the dark mothers as my witness. I knew that I was never going to be the same person. And the story concludes actually 2 years later. I was at a networking event and I sat through a wonderful presentation. And I noticed throughout that presentation that there was a woman a few seats down who would look at me every so often. And I looked at her and I would smile. And afterwards, this woman walked to me And she said hello, and I said hello back. And she says, I'm sorry, I have a really weird question to ask you. I said, sure, go ahead. And she says to me, were you in a major car accident? And I looked at her and I made full eye contact with her. And I recognized my sister in her eyes. I said to her, it was you. And this time she reached out. She took my hands in hers. Her hands were steady. My hands shook. And she said to me, I don't know what you did that day, but when you took my hands, something from you passed into me. It changed everything. I have never been the same. And she told me that she was now on her own spiritual journey. She was on her own path. That day had been the catalyst of change in her life. And here we were 2 years later, hours away, coming full circle. As a Mary and Magdalene priestess, it doesn't escape me that that's the point. You see, if you know anything about Mary's role in the stories, in the ancient texts, she was there when everyone else left. She's the one who stayed when everyone would have fled in fear. She looked at her greatest trauma, suffering, and she stayed. Days later, she would be the one to receive the greatest gift of transcendence because she remained present, not because she wasn't terrified, not because she wasn't shaking, not because she didn't want to leave and go home, but because she knew that someone had to stay, and she knew that her place was to stand in the gap where others cannot stand. Her place was in the liminal space between life, between death, between light and shadow, between fear and transcendence. That was her role. She stayed not because she was fearless, but because her love was greater than her fear. If you're considering walking this path, or if you're already walking this path and you're at a threshold of a new initiation, know this, you're not alone. You do not walk the wilderness by yourself. The Marian path, that initiation, it's not found just in certifications or ordinations. It's not found in the title. It's what moves through you when your body is trembling and fear is all around you, and you choose to walk steadily through it. You don't even have to be fully ready. You just have to be willing to show up, even if you arrive late. And so, I welcome you into this space. I plan on recording more of these vlogs. Please feel free to subscribe if this lights a spark of resonance within you. You can also follow me at Spiral of Light Collective. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Threads. I have a website and blog at spiraloflightcollective.com. And please feel free to email me. I run retreats here domestically and in France, in the south of France, taking people through all of the power spots, through the vortex energies. We stay at Rennes-le-Château. I could not have been the kind of person who could hold the container for other people's grief and stories had I not decided that I was going to walk through the wreckage if I had to. And so I'm here to bear witness to those who need someone, to remind them that they hold the divine spark within themselves. Welcome.